Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls across the network automation world, this is the 10th episode of Network Automagic. We have a special guest today. It's Stuart Clark. Now, he has a long backstory, and there's a lot to get started with. So actually, I'm going to let our guest introduce himself. So Stuart, tell us a little bit about you.
Thank you for that great introduction. I don't think it's as long as my beard, but I'll certainly try. So hello, I'm Stuart Clark, senior developer advocate with Spotify. I've had a very interesting career, one which I'm very, very grateful for. I've done things which I never thought would even humanly possible for me. I left school, started my career in hairdressing. I did that for 18 years. Then I retrained and taught myself network automation, moved to doing NOC and just basically network stuff. And then within 3 years, I'd done my CCNP, CCNA, CCNA security, CCNP, CCIP, and I'd done a couple of junior pull-ons as well on the side. And I was fortunate enough to interview at Cisco, which was just for a contract back in 2012. It was meant to be a 3-month contract, and I ended up actually staying at Cisco for nearly 11 years. During that time, I did network engineering, network leader, network architecture. I started in network automation and self-taught myself to code again. So completely pivoted again, and then had the amazing opportunity to join DevNet. Right back in the early days, so 2017, and did 4.5 years on DevNet. Within that time, I got to speak at some great events, meet some very amazing people, including both of you on the call. I think that's what first got me connected with you all, and did the DevNet certifications, as they were called back then. Was one of the first 5 for the DevNet expert, now CCIE Automation, which was amazing. I always wanted to get the CCIE path. Did the RNS a couple of times, but never made it through. So it was great to be sort of like, first 5 of DevNet expert, CCIE Automation. Left Cisco, went to AWS for 2.5 years, which was great, real eye-opener to do that. So I was moving more into cloud. And then 2025, got the opportunity to come here to join Spotify.
It's been quite you from hairdressing. I mean, dear listener, I mean, I'm gonna go lean on my electronics or electrician degree. So
Yep.
it's good that we both have something to fall back on once AI takes all of our work. I mean,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'll go back to lowering ears, as we used to call it.
lower them ears, high and tight. We're
Yeah.
gonna look real good. Boys and girls, we're gonna look real good. I'll come do your wiring. We got Urs. I don't know what you started a farm, or you moved
Yes,
to the family
exactly.
farm. So I mean, you've actually completed the Silicon Valley run, Urs, without going to Silicon Valley. You moved to a farm and you have ducks or something now. So I never want to see any of you again. I want to till the earth. Please do not email or contact. Like you've sped run this thing. Now, Stuart, Cisco DevNet.
Yeah.
We got to get our controversy points in, and it's your former employer. We don't poo-poo, but DevNet has been kind of underfunded lately. I mean, they might have accomplished their mission, right? So there's no reason to overfund, but people have been complaining about the sandboxes. People have been complaining about, well, people always complain, right, Stuart? Have you been keeping an eye on your old colleagues at the DevNet site?
Yeah, so when I left Cisco, I was asked to be a Cisco champion. I joined Cisco Champions, and I also joined VIP, and so I became a learn at Cisco, or learning a certification VIP champion, Cisco champion, Insiders champion. So I was like double VIP and stuff. I was one
They
of
have
3
like
double
5
VIPs.
programs for 5 business units. It's amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was still very, very sort of like, I think when I left DevNet, people thought I would just kind of close the door on that. But I think that the thing with me is that I enjoyed being part of that community so much. I still sort of like once I got my sort of like decoupled my Cisco email address back to my, personal email addresses, I was kind of back on the forums within a couple of weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And I was still like number one contributor on community Cisco,
Right.
certainly within the DevNet space. I've got a coffee delivery.
Oh, fantastic. Well, we'll
Yeah,
just fill in the dead air while our oh,
here we go.
nice.
Cheers.
Somebody actually cares about you, ladies and gentlemen. Nobody's delivering coffee to me and Urs. We have to self source.
There you go. This is a good one as well.
This is peak automation, ladies and gentlemen. Once you've
Mhm.
figured out your coffee pipeline, that is
My,
excellence,
my
right?
coffee pipeline is strong. Carry
Very
on.
strong, very strong. Always keep the
Yeah. And
yeah.
so yeah, I remained around the community, and I did champion and VIP for a couple of years, and this was the only year that I decided not to opt in for both of
Mhm.
those. I decided, they had done enough to qualify me for champion and VIP again, but I just thought, I think maybe it's just time to take a little step back from that.
Yeah.
But DevNet is with that sort of like getting into the nuances of the sort of like political inside of Cisco. So DevNet obviously started as a very small business unit.
Mhm.
If you go back to the origins of DevNet, it started out as just a table stand within
Mhm.
Cisco Live,
Yep.
with Susie, Mandy, and Rick, I think his name was.
They
They
went
kind
rather
of start.
viral, right? Or viral, or however like they got
Yeah,
that
so
later.
viral was the kind of the
Mhm.
was
Cisco
a
Modeling Lab today. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, CO, yeah. But I mean, it was internal for many years, as many
Yeah.
people know. But a few versions had leaked out onto the internet now and again, and then
Thank
it
you for
was
that.
really only for sort of like it was out there, but it wasn't out there.
Mhm.
It was one of those weird things, and it didn't sort of obviously become commercialized until they did CML, which was amazing that they actually did that. And then they brought the free tier along, which was even better,
Mhm.
to run the free tier.
Mhm.
But yeah, so DevNet started out really sort of smaller stuff, and then it really grew, and it went through a couple. Even when I was on there, we went through sort of like two org changes
Mhm.
within sort of like Cisco. They moved us around just a little bit, but then the biggest change for Cisco came sort of 2000 and I want to say 2019 when we moved into learning and certification,
Mm.
because that was the year we started working on the certification for DevNet. And I think this was sort of like the critical point of DevNet. And it was sort of like that was the sort of like it went from the community membership was sort of like it was high, but then we started to climb into like the 300,000s, the 400,000s
Mm.
kind of piece.
Mhm.
Um, and we crossed the sort of 500,000 members quite quickly in
Mm.
2019. The certifications the DevNet certifications were one of the fastest sort of growing certifications. I think they had more people taking the DevNet associate in the first week than any other certification. So it was huge. And so DevNet was sort of really high. And if you think back to sort of like Cisco Live,
Mhm.
Susie was on the stage with Chuck Robbins, and Chuck Robbins was saying that DevNet is the future of Cisco.
Mm.
You know, that was San Diego. So that was 2019,
Mhm.
just before the certifications were launched. And so DevNet was really riding really, really, really high. But then things began to change.
COVID.
Um,
I mean, yeah.
and then DevNet was moved out of learning the certification organization and moved
Yep.
into ET&I. So ET&I
Mhm.
is emerging technologies and infrastructure. I think it's now called Outshift.
Mhm.
Yeah, oh, yeah, Outshift. I'm sure it is.
That's right. Yeah.
So it was moved into that team, and then we started to lose some of the leadership.
Mhm.
So Mandy Whaley, who was one of the founding sort of like members, who was senior director, Mandy left first. And then a couple of months went by and Susie left. Um, and then, DevNet then really pivoted.
Mhm.
And I think during that pivot, that's when the struggle for DevNet sort of began, because the message then became unclear what DevNet really stood for and
Mhm.
who DevNet was helping. Because beforehand, it was very, very clear that DevNet was helping network engineers learn network automation, consume
Mm.
APIs, etc. It
Mhm.
was very, very clear. But then the pivot was, the messaging was around, DevNet is now the future is cloud.
Mhm.
That pivoted within even a couple of months to the future is applications.
Right.
then it became the future is DevOps and applications, and then
Mm-hmm.
DevOps applications and SRE.
Mm-hmm.
That's when things started to sort of like really. I don't think the sort of like the direction was particularly clear at that stage of the people. Certification had stayed with learning at Cisco, rightfully so, where it
Mm-hmm.
belonged. But DevNet was not involved in that. The team at DevNet was not involved in that. And then, it just, I think, unfortunately, that was 2020.
Mm.
No, no, I'm missing a year. 2022, perhaps.
COVID is
When I
hard.
left,
Yeah.
yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
think that was when it was. I think a lot of people were starting to sort of like, a lot of the core following that DevNet had built up had
Mm.
started to sort of like look at other avenues,
Yeah.
that started to go with other avenues. And yeah, I think that was just basically then the sort of the point of where the messaging around what DevNet did had just become unclear.
Right. And of course, there was the breakdown in the certification tracks where they moved components of automation into every track, right? Like 10% or something like that.
Yeah, I mean
There.
that's pretty natural for, I think, pretty natural for Cisco
Mm-hmm.
certifications. A technology comes along like that. Like we saw it with security. If you remember, like back in when the CCNA was the 801, there was
Mm-hmm.
very little security on that. When they changed it to the 802, more security came in that, and then subsequently, more securities come
Mm-hmm.
into that track. And automation, network infrastructure as code, for example, has sort of like has just done exactly the same. It's
Mm.
because it has become it's gone from a nice to have to a must have now.
Yeah.
It's been a must have for years now.
Mm. Which is very interesting. I mean, one of the core things back in the day, at least, DevNet provided was the wonderful access to certain cloud sandboxes and that sort of thing,
Yeah,
like spinning up a DNA, Cisco DNA center, now
yeah.
called Cisco Catalyst Center. You don't do that on a whim, and they don't
No,
like it when you play around with the production one too much. So it's, yeah, it's been a rough ride, changing messaging, that sort of
yeah,
thing. There's, of course,
yeah.
yeah, things outside Ciscoverse, which of course people then start to explore. Very nice. But that was the past, and now we're of course looking at the future, like what's going on right now. Are you working more hours, like all of us are, but like in this AI, LLM, vibe coding, Instagram, buy a Mac Mini nonsense sphere, or what's going on right now in your part of the world?
Yeah, I'm actually working less. So I think that's I I think this is more of both a change in the industry, changing the technologies, and also setting a lot more boundaries. Um, I've admitted many times that I can be a workaholic, especially
Mm.
when you do work from home, and you enjoy what you do. And like for me, my sort of like job has almost been like a hobby that I get paid to do. I enjoy it so much. So what I do, and so it's easy. And obviously, the the communities that you're involved in is a global communities. There are global communities at Cisco, global communities at AWS, global communities here with Spotify. And so there's always somebody online. There's always a vibrant community happening. There's always something happening at every hour of the day. And
Mm.
there has to be a point where you say, okay, I'm done for the day. I have to rest myself. I have to self care. I have to switch off. I have to go and do something else.
Mm.
Otherwise, like you see many people in the industry, they just burn out, and that happens. Happened to me, happened to many great friends. And so, but sort of like having like, you know, AI assistants now helping me with my work, I'm turning out work faster than I ever have. Probably like a lot of people like that. I'm able to do things so much quicker. Like for instance, a great example of this is that we've been shifting our documentation recently at Spotify, from basically from DocuService onto a hosted provider,
Oh.
and moving over a big documentation piece. When everything's hosted in GitHub, because everything's, documents as code,
Mm-hmm.
um, moving something like that over, and you're sort of like bringing in deltas and you're taking one piece from one piece and one piece from one piece. The not only is the sort of like the attention to detail and cognitive load there absolutely huge by doing that, because
Mm.
I did something like 2 days ago, was reviewing the documentation before it went live, and as we're shifting documentation over, the documentation has to be in a very slightly sort of like different format when we're doing things like redirect links.
Mm-hmm.
I ran a checker on this and I found that I had 221 broken links.
Womp womp.
Now, all it was just the way that the links were formatted.
Mm.
Now, in the olden days, I might have written a shell script or a Python script, a bash script, or something like that just to do that for me.
Mm-hmm.
No need to do that anymore.
Put the
Claude
clanker on it.
Claude Code to the rescue. Take all these things, say, like, this is what I want, this is what I want, built a skill around it, dropped it into that, sat back in my chair and just did this.
Mm-hmm. Sit
Thank
back,
you very much.
relax,
No,
watch the little ticker go up.
yeah, exactly. Then run all of my checks the same again. I went from 221 broken links to 59 broken links. Ran it again, looked at this, analyzed some stuff, checked some stuff. Did that just a couple of times, got down to 29, got down to sort of, 30. So I back up to 30. I don't know how I went down and back up again. And then eventually got it down to 0.
Mm-hmm.
Now, all of that happened in the space of an hour. If I was to even write a script for that, it would have taken me a good day to write the script and get it right.
Mm-hmm.
If I'd have done that manually, I'd still be doing it now. So it's a funny one, is that I'm working faster, but I'm not working harder and I'm not working longer.
Mm.
So for me, everybody wins.
Well, you haven't fallen into the mania trap that a lot of people are getting,
WrestleMania?
Yeah, I mean, the AI mania, man. Like, we see people who are, either they're launching a, my open source project every other week, right?
Yeah.
Or they're just, completely hammering at work, trying to remove trying to reduce head count that nobody asked them to reduce yet.
Yeah.
It's very interesting to see somebody, at least on paper. We actually need to check your Git commit logs now and make sure that you're not lying to us. We do our vetting very seriously here at Network Automagic. So just hand over those passwords. We're going to take a look at those. We're going to see.
You take a look at that. Yeah, you can peer review me. Absolutely.
Yeah, we'll do screen time on the Mac and like the kids for the kids, man. Like, we'll lock you out after 8 hours.
Yeah.
But okay, it's good to hear that somebody's not, falling into the mania trap, because there's a lot of people, who've gone manic basically with productivity gains. All right.
Yeah, they have. And, you see this in things, and it's sort of like, I saw something like a couple of weeks ago, and you'll have seen this, and sort of like Anthropic released it, Claude released it. They said, now you can check these things on your phone.
Mm-hmm.
And people are kind of posting saying, this is great. I was at the gym and I did this, and I was out walking my dog and I did this. And I'm thinking, why the actual F are you doing that?
Mm-hmm.
Because
That does
for
not sound
me,
healthy.
it's not, absolutely not healthy. And I don't believe it's healthy in any sense of the way. And it's like, well, I'm not one to sort of like preach and say, well, you should be doing this, you do this, you shouldn't be doing this away from your desk. Everybody, live your life how you feel you want to live. But for me personally, no, that's not healthy. It's the same thing that I talk about when I say setting boundaries and things. I've had, see, back since my Cisco days, I've had the mobile apps on my phone, WebEx on my phone, I've got Slack on my phone now, and all of those things. Now, obviously, they're constantly churning, constantly going away. A number of years ago, what I decided to do was, when I finished work, I would just disconnect those apps. Just like, the only time I ever did that was like when I went away on holiday, or it was like, the Christmas season or something. I would sign out from the app, so I wasn't getting any alerts, any distractions. A number of years ago, I just decided, you know what, when I finish work, sort of like 6 p.m. at nighttime,
Mm-hmm.
I'm done. That's it. All of those apps I'm signed out. That's it.
Second iPhone, best. Like, just keep an
Yeah.
old one.
Yeah,
Like,
I used to run 2 phones and did the same. Yeah.
the 2 phones have saved my life completely.
Yeah.
But I gotta admit, last 6 months, this one has been turned off, and I had to install on the primary, and I have been going down the mania path. And I've been in the hot tub with an iPad, prompting, smoking a cigar, and having 12 Claude instances like run over my thing, and I'm just scrolling through their output, going like, excellent, excellent. Nobody asked me to do this, but
No.
and then everyone on Monday is going to be so impressed, and then nobody's impressed.
Yeah.
Everyone's worried about your mental health, and
Yeah.
but I do support the middle of the day walk. Like
Yeah.
you go out for a smoke or something, and you can keep the cache warm, right? You can keep the
Yeah.
clods running. You can have a
Yeah.
quick little walk.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Make sure that hey, there's a CVE. Do you want us to continue with the project? Keep going. I didn't say stop. Um, crack the whip. You're paying for the token, so
Yeah.
let's crack
Yeah.
that whip. But
Yeah.
like you say, it's a balancing act, right? Like
It is. Yeah. Yeah. And like you say, it's sort of like when it comes to lunchtime and things, it's sort of like often stuff. It's sort of like if I'm doing sort of like any kind of like analyzing of stuff, I'm refactoring things, anything which essentially I don't want anything being pushed or anything being changed while I'm
uh-huh,
away.
uh-huh,
But if I know it's going to crunch a great number of tokens and it's going to be thinking about something, it's a fairly big task. I'll
uh-huh.
just say, yep, run this. I'll sort of like step away for that hour. And then when I come back, I can just pick straight up again.
Mm.
And, something's been running, just building in the background. I don't have to just sit and watch it. I can just walk away from that while I'm, out with the dog or sort of like taking a walk with my wife.
Mm. And that's the thing. You disconnect during that walk. I personally love to do the little hey elicitation thing. Like, hey, feel free to stop at any time and ping my ass, and just Mr. Claude,
Yeah.
feel free to ask me because I'd rather I don't have as many tokens to burn as Spotify, so I'd rather he not go down the wrong path or stop. And I love coming back from lunch and getting like one ping during lunch, and he's like, "Hey, by the way, we noticed this," and I'm like, "Option 3," and then a little text, and off he goes. It's like having an intern that I
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
verbally abuse without HR getting involved, which is great.
That's a good way of putting it.
I would like to see your AI logs, your
No,
prompts.
no. There's a reason why I have multiple accounts. There's a reason. I might have been banned. Never mind. Hey, Anthropic, sponsor. Oh wait, no. You're developer advocate. Like actually, you just said that you weren't want to be preachy, but you're the developer advocate at Spotify. So a developer advocate that doesn't get preachy. He suspects you are lying, good sir.
Yeah.
What does that look like now? The developer advocacy for Spotify.
Developer advocacy is great. I've done developer advocacy now for 8 years. Developer advocacy in that time has really changed.
Mm.
Really, really changed. I think back when I started doing developer advocacy was almost seen as this sort of rock star lifestyle.
Mm.
Um, and
Go up on
you
stage.
you're on the stage, you're at all the conferences, you're at all the glamorous after parties, you're sort of like on with people and things, and that is, that still happens,
Hmm.
people, but it doesn't happen as much in the industry. I think
Twice per
everybody's sort of
quarter.
like, yeah, post sort of like 2020 COVID really sort of like tightened up on their sort of like expenses and companies did on their expenses and their travels.
Hmm.
But developer advocacy, um, when I started in things, it was a lot of it was about vanity metrics, clicks,
Yeah.
likes, shares, that kind
Stars
of
on the
stuff.
repo, baby. We're right back
Stars
at
on the
that.
repo, yeah,
Right now, we're right back at that, though. Like, everyone
yeah,
has that star counter at the bottom with the
yeah,
trend graph. And I just keep shaking my head, like, what?
yeah. But and then that's great when it's your personal kind of piece. But when you're in a company
Mm.
like Spotify, like AWS, like Cisco, or any company, and
Hmm.
you're in DevRel, you need a pipeline, and that pipeline ultimately leads to you bringing in revenue for the business. And so if you're not doing that, this is why, DevRel is one of those things that is kind of hit first and hit hard when companies
Hmm.
start, having cutbacks and they start having layoffs. The DevRel is often one of the first things to go because it's a vanity project.
Hmm.
Um, and so,
HR and developer relations, man.
yeah,
Legals.
or
No, we
marketing,
can't. We can't touch
yeah.
legal. We can't touch legal, but we can
Oh,
touch.
no, no, can't touch those things. So developer advocacy for me has always been a pipeline and understanding what you're doing for the business, how you're growing attrition, how you're sort of like, making sure that the customers who are signed, they are using your service are coming back,
Mm-hmm.
they're re-signing back to your service.
Mm-hmm.
So there's all of these, pieces and things. So every piece of like content, which is, one of the traditional things that developer advocacy does, whether that's blogs, events, or videos, just those three things of content, there's a content pipeline. And I
Mm-hmm.
have to sort of build within that pipeline how this is moving the needle forward, how it's driving business, how it's generating revenue, what that actually looks like. So, how many people came to this event? So, how many people followed up with us, booked a demo, became a customer?
Yeah, that's why you gotta let them scan the link, folks. You gotta, if you
Yeah.
want nice things in life at the conference, you gotta let them scan the link, man.
Yeah. I mean, scanning and scanning links is great. Scanning links is kind of very sort of like, and gathering email addresses is very
Mm-hmm.
top of funnel. Like when
Mm-hmm.
I went back and said about DevNet, how DevNet had like, when I left, I think 550,000 sort of like community members.
Yep.
That's 550,000 email addresses.
Yeah.
Great.
Real meet people who are actually engaging.
Yeah.
Fraction of that,
Yeah.
right?
But how many people actually are engaging? How many people are actually, how many of those, how do you tie that into some sort of like
Mm-hmm.
revenue? Now, if you can
Mm-hmm.
tie 550,000 people into revenue,
Mm-hmm.
fantastic. I mean, amazing. You're getting into unicorn droppings. But if you could tie 10% of that to revenue, that would still be incredible to do. And I think that's what the one part of, that you see with developer advocacy. And the one thing, and anytime I speak to any developer advocate, is
Uh-huh.
what does your pipeline look like? How do you measure success?
Uh-huh.
Because as well as, you go into the calls, you go into the calls internally with your leadership and stuff. And that's the conversation that you're having is how are you measuring success and what does success look like? What
Mm-hmm.
have you achieved in this quarter? And that's to me, this sort of like, so developer advocacy is part being a rock star, but it's also part, making sure that you're turning the cogs, turning the gears for the company.
Mm-hmm. And in
I
this
think
case, it's Spotify. Go ahead, Urs.
for me, it's always how do you actually measure the revenue you generate? Because how many likes you have, how many views you have, how many people land on the blog, that's something you
Mm-hmm.
can measure. But how do you measure then the revenue? How many customers are because of your blog
Yes.
post?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's for me a hard challenge.
Yeah, it is. But you can actually do that, with UTM tracking links and you can actually follow the pipeline. You can do that. And
Mm-hmm.
we have tools like that. There's like a number of great deal of tools out there which can actually do that. So like, we host like out of hours bi-weekly and we have to get people to come to this out of hours that we run.
Mm.
We have LinkedIn posts, we have links on our website, and we have links in blogs that we put out. And we put out, a couple of blogs a week, and there's dedicated links in that. We know from that tracking
Mm-hmm.
who came or where they came from to come to the out of hours. Sorry, the
Mm-hmm.
office hours. And the
Mm-hmm.
office hours tends to be the sort of like the people who are they're doing their research, they are interested in the product, they want to ask some direct questions, probably
Mm-hmm.
before they book a sort of like a demo or schedule some time with our team to go over their specific use case.
Mm-hmm.
So we know where they've come from. Let's just say that we know that they've come from three sources. Once we've captured them within there, we're then able to track them through them booking demos, to going to call to sales, to understand exactly what they've purchased. We see them come into the trial stage and then we see them go after that. So we
Mm-hmm.
have the tracking tools all the way through to be able to follow that pipeline. And this is where I guess some DevRel sort of like might sort of like drop off because you can track them at the top of the funnel
Mm-hmm.
piece and you can see them turning up. But after that, you lose that visibility, the sort of like the last mile visibility
Mm-hmm.
of when they became a customer. Now, that is the last mile piece. That's the important piece because that's the piece that you want to say, hey, we did this webinar, we did this blog, we did this video. It led from this step to this step to this step to this step. Then they became a customer. You're not creating that sort of like, I'm solely responsible for that because your sales team, your CS team, your account team all played a part in this of that
Mm-hmm.
customer journey, but you are part of the Nevertheless, you are part of the journey.
Mhm.
You're part of that team.
So, I mean, if I'm coming in and I want to buy some ads at Spotify, I mean, I'm clearly the most important customer. You, of course, you have both the eyeballs and the eyeball buyers, and of course, you're mitigating that between third-party apps. There's a large ecosystem at Spotify. I spent like a little bit of time, just around automating the podcast. We distribute through Spotify. We're very happy and thankful for their wonderful distribution of the audio and video to other platforms. Thank you very much. But the docs on the creator side versus there's definitely always going to be more love for the money men side, which is the ad tech, which is the real customer of Spotify, versus the creator side, which I get, which, although it's very, very well rounded, like compared to the Apple experience, which is a lot rougher, uh, I'm really happy just having Spotify at the top of the distribution side of this wonderful podcast that you're listening to. By the way, we're going to get Stuart to fix and get us all the monetization in that. He's going to tweak the values, I'm sure. We'll convince him after the show. Don't worry, listener. We're not going anywhere. He's got a magic wand. I know he does. He looks like a wizard, man. I mean, he
Yeah.
must have. So what is that balancing act, though, between of course, customer acquisition? Spotify as a company has to exist to be able to serve free stuff to me, for example. This is all free to me. I give them content in exchange. As soon as I get big enough, I am allowed to share in the ad revenue or something like that. What is the breakdown? Like, are there any other customers that I'm forgetting when it comes to like your advocacy work?
No, and it's sort of like the part of Spotify that I'm actually with is so Spotify obviously is one of those sort of like very global successful brands. I don't think you can really go anywhere on the earth and not know who Spotify is. And even, could describe it or say what it does. So within Spotify, there's the team which I work on is is essentially the backstage team. So like a lot of big tech companies, Spotify being one of the biggest global tech companies out there, is to be able to do what Spotify does and build Spotify at scale. And like you alluded to, to be able to do the things that you're able to do, and for hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people to listen to audio,
Hundreds of
music,
millions, even
millions,
we might be hitting the
millions.
beam, man. Like,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
Spotify, dude. It's like
Spotify.
running water, dude.
Yeah,
Water has to run, electricity, and
yeah,
Spotify.
and
Otherwise, the
music. Yeah,
natives get restless.
the natives get restless. So within there so if we go back to sort of like 2014, Spotify, that was the sort of one of the sort of like significant growth periods for Spotify. Spotify was moving from this audio app to an audio experience. It wasn't just about music anymore. It was podcasts were taking off, whole bunch of things. Books were, audio books were coming online. So Spotify 2014 was growing massively. That was the biggest sort of like peak of downloads when you look at Spotify. And during that time, when your company starts to grow like that, then you need more developers, you need more engineers, you need more staff, you know? And so whilst sort of we're celebrating sort of like the growth and the success of the people downloading our apps, our onboarding was in decline. So one side of the business is doing well, but the onboarding is sort of like going down. So if you go back and look at the metrics on this, is that we hire a new developer, new engineer. It was taking them sort of like 6 weeks to get to their 10th pull request, which is a huge amount of time. And that's sort of like a measurement of onboarding success when you're bringing on new developers, engineers. And so that amount of time becomes sort of like, that's not on, I like to say it's like, it's not onboarding, it's almost archaeological excavation of bringing on an engineer, developer.
Yeah.
And so we at Spotify needed to help engineers learn faster, because what happens and it happens in a lot of countries, is your senior engineers become sort of like the go-to, because they're the only ones with the real knowledge. So how do you transfer the knowledge from the seniors to the rest of the organization? How do you ensure that any engineers, developers that you're taking on can get up to speed properly? And so 2014, Spotify developed something called Backstage. So Backstage is an internal IDP. And so the IDP works in many ways for us at Spotify. It's essentially our single pane of glass.
Internal
shows how-
developer portal, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes.
Try to
Thank you
tie
for-
this to network engineering in some way. We've really screwed up on this episode because we talked
No,
about what we're
I can
interested
bring it
in.
back.
Bring it back.
Yeah, I'll bring it back. I'll bring it right back. So yeah, single pane of glass. You can basically see absolutely
Mhm.
everything that's happening in the deployment and the networks
Uh-huh.
at Spotify. You can see everything that's in there. But not only that, it has golden paths in there. So a new developer, new engineer can come on board, follow these golden paths, and understand how and why we build software the way that we build it. Everything's essentially within this, inside the IDP. And we ran that internally for 6 years. And this is what enabled Spotify to scale in the way that it did with Backstage. So, but in 2020, we outsourced this to CNCF and open source this. And it's a thriving community. I think there's over 20,000 people in the open source community for Backstage.
Bingo.
But listening to customer feedback throughout that journey of the open source is customers wanted to be able to plug and play. They didn't want to have to build this themselves. So what we did was Spotify now offers this as a hosted service, as a SaaS service called Portal.
Oh.
So in many ways, I like to compare it to sort of like how Kubernetes started within Google. You know, as the sort of like Kubernetes started as the 7 project, and then to the Borg project, and then it was open source. So essentially, we've almost become sort of like the IDP of the container world now within this. A lot of tech companies, the big companies, Meta, AWS, Google, Netflix, they all build internal tools, just like we did. We build our internal tools because there isn't anything commercially out there which will suit the needs. So we build it ourselves. We have the capacity, we have the scale, we have the talent, we have the engineering to do that. But then we want to release that to the world.
Yeah.
We want to be able to give this out there to say, look, this is how we solved critical problems. This is how we were able to scale. You don't have to be, the big company like Spotify is to use this, and people using Backstage and Portal aren't necessarily as big. We have people using this who are 20 seats kind of at a company. We have people who are using this who are 5,000 seats, 5,000 people at a company. So it really differs across there. But essentially what we've done is we've built something and then we've put it out there and we've opened our hand and said, let us show you the way to do this. Let us show you how we solve challenges, because we know that the challenge that we had, these are universal challenges that every company has them. Every company is going to have them. It was the same when I started talking about network automation back in the day. The problems that you kept hearing, they sort of like every conference you went to, every webinar that you hosted, you heard the same problems, whether it was a getting started problem, a scaling problem, a secrets problem, Ansible problems, Python problems, multi-vendor problems. You just kept hearing the same thing over and over again. It's the same thing that we hear now. You hear the same thing at the companies. They're wanting to do this. Did you solve this at Spotify? Well, the answer is yes, we did solve it. And this is how we solved it. Let us show you how we solved this.
So that's actually, go ahead. Urs.
Can you explain for, let's say, a network engineer who does a little automation script, a little Ansible, does maybe
It
have
doesn't
another
have the
team.
developer background to know how good life could be.
Yeah, exactly.
right?
We have a team of system engineers who do infrastructure as code. And why do they need an IDP? What is the benefit of having best practices?
Good question. So we touched on this a little bit also when we spoke about AI, and I think that's really important, is that an IDP essentially is the voice to chaos.
Yeah.
So let's say that you had 5 software engineers. They're all committing code. You're all working on this project. The IDP gives you visibility complete into that entire sort of life cycle. SDLC, for example, gives you that entire view of where your entire project is. Every commit that is going in, you're seeing it within the IDP, because everything is centralized within there. You're not having to hop across multiple repos. You're not having to hop into ask certain teams. So the IDP gives you visibility into who's working on what team's working on what team owns things for software. You
Project
have multiple
management
people.
tooling, really, overview.
Yeah, pretty much everything is in there, and you're able to get all of those insights, within there, and also monitor that software when it's then in production.
Mm.
But then if you had 5 engineers, let's say that those 5 engineers each were using AI agents, and let's say that they were all using 3 AI agents, and those 3 AI agents are all checking in code. All of a sudden, you've gone from that team of 5 to a team of 30 very quickly overall. So you have now the chaos has gone from being this big to sort of this big, and you've got a lot more stuff being checked in. How do you monitor all of that? How do you still monitor all of that life cycle? How do you keep on top of all that chaos, making sure that your coding sticks to the company's best practices, that everything's that's checked in time, version control, what is tight, that your Yarn is running the latest version of Yarn, your Java is running the latest version of Java. All of those things is actually running in there. Your compliance is in there. More importantly, if something along that cycle breaks and it's 2 a.m, how do you find out who owns all of this? How do you have that sort of like a trail? And it's not a case of finger pointing to say that person did that, this person did this. It's about understanding where these things went wrong. So essentially, the IDP becomes your layer of abstraction for
Which-
your entire infrastructure, your entire sort of like software pipeline.
Which is
And have a BGP looking glass.
yeah. There
Yeah,
you
you
go.
go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, because we have a very wide spectrum of listener from, the solo MSP, like one guy at an MSP, to the single enterprise dev, all the way to the big teams that actually have actual software standards and practices, right?
Yeah.
There's this whole spectrum of, hey, fend for yourself, use the LLM, do whatever, which is going on right now. We're seeing a golden age of people being able to get shit done. But of course, for larger teams, they're getting, like you said, order to the chaos. So like the centralized service catalog is an interesting place of storing it inside of Backstage. I mean, we got the software templating, we got the documentation as code, which is probably the most valuable part. Like you spoke to with tracking off all those repos and that sort of thing. Like for smaller teams, I mean, just the Git tooling and the GitLab, GitHub tooling is probably enough. But of course, when you start sprawling and you start having those AI agents, and oh boy, and extensibility, you got a plugin ecosystem for Backstage. It's definitely a very interesting candidate. I looked at it maybe 3 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, after it was open sourced and that sort of thing, stabilized. I just thought that the value for me wasn't immediately available. The time to deploy and the time to commit to it versus, getting stuff done wasn't justifiable. Is there, who is this for? Like, at what point is this the golden ticket?
I think it's, for me, it's like, when I started on this journey, when I joined the company and things, I was actually surprised at the people using it, across the board. And like you said, sometimes we think about this as, just like a company thing, but I actually know individuals who are using the OSS repo on Backstage. They're actually using it to monitor their own sort of like their own things. So I know somebody who's in the AWS community. When I moved over to Spotify, they contacted me and they said, "Hey, I see you're working with Backstage on Portal," and they said, "I run this." And I said, the first question was, "You run this as a company?" And they said, "No, I actually run this myself." Because they have workloads, they have things that they're running in AWS for their own projects, their own demos, those kind of things. They're actually running Backstage to monitor and work with their AWS instances with their plugins. So whether they're doing that for things like data experience, insights, quality and standards, as you mentioned, or when they're building demos, they might be using like templates and Scaffolder to be able to do this. Essentially, they're using these parts. So it's not just the wide sort of like spectrum of people I've found who are using this. I've seen people using it as, personal things, and I've seen people using it as company things. Now, obviously, the open source and the SaaS provided one,
Mhm.
you would have to be really going some as an individual to think, okay, I'm going to use the SaaS one and I'm going to pay Spotify to be able to have this as an individual, as a user. We obviously find that that's more of a company centric thing. And the companies which are doing that or are using Portal are the ones who sort of like don't want to have like 3 or 4 developers who are specifically spending their days in React and looking after the Backstage instance. You know,
Mhm.
they don't have that as a resource catalog. They don't have that kind of piece, or they don't want to have engineers doing that for them.
Mhm.
So they would be the ones perhaps who are more sort of like, I guess, enterprise, who would be utilizing the hosted service. But there's a use case as well for individuals who essentially are running Backstage as the OSS version. They've cloned it and they're basically monitoring all of their own infrastructure
Mm.
for whatever, you know, purposes and uses. That might be their websites, you know, even their content is running on there because their content is hosted somewhere else.
Mhm.
And they need to deploy that, and they need to deploy it quickly.
That definitely makes sense. We're looking at a lot of code sprawl. I mean, everyone's trying to be top layer this, top layer that.
Yeah.
Enterprise paid solutions versus open source solutions. This is definitely a very interesting product to the network engineering realm, in my opinion. But of course, yeah, the fact that it doesn't have the word BGP, labeled immediately in the product, that makes the grippiness to the average automation
Yeah.
landscape. It's very,
Yeah.
it's always a
But
balancing act.
yeah, it's interesting what you mentioned. These sort of like, you know, one of the first things that I came around when I came to Spotify was, you know, we went through I went through the onboarding and the training.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that training was actually, you know, for me was actually building something with Backstage. I'd done it before starting with the company, but now I was actually inside the company.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, I basically built up an OSS version of Backstage on my MacBook.
Mm-hmm.
And the first things I started to do was to integrate systems that I knew, which was, you know, integrating sort of templates for building things within AWS. I
Mm-hmm.
started then to integrate things, interestingly, like Netbox. I
Mm.
started to implement things, anything which had an API.
Yeah.
Essentially, then I could start to integrate. And I started to integrate things like, you know, I integrated things from the DevNet sandbox because they have the always on things, you know, with
Mm-hmm.
a open shared password. And so I was able to put like the DevNet SD-WAN sandbox, because I'd worked on that product for 70 years and I knew how the API structure worked.
Mm-hmm.
I was able to sort of like build that and put vmanage inside my Backstage instance.
Mm-hmm.
So I was able to sort of like see the sort of like the management sort of like center, and I was able to use the APIs
Mm-hmm.
within there to actually then deploy templates and changes to SD-WAN actually through Backstage. So I didn't have to write any Python code. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
have to go into the UI of SD-WAN to be able to do that. I could actually do that through my templates through Backstage via an API call into the SD-WAN instance. So it's like anything, is sort of like when you start to learn a technology, you build with things that you know, or you
Mm-hmm.
build with things like that you want to solve.
Right.
Network automation was exactly the same for me. It was the same for a lot of people. You start to solve the challenges that you know are a challenge for you, and that like low hanging fruit kind of piece that we always talk about. So
Mm.
like I'm asked to get this version from all of these devices, and I've got 200 of them across my network, and each week the PM says to me, what version are we running in our firewalls, regardless of whether we've changed that or not.
Mm.
You know, yeah, back in the day we logged into this via the CLI, and then after a while we thought like, hey, let's just try a Python script, an Ansible script to do that. So I started to do the tasks which were familiar to me in code. And the same thing when I came to Backstage.
Mm.
Started to do the same things that I knew, which I'd done previously in previous jobs, previous roles as an engineer. And I put those into Backstage. So can Backstage now do what I was doing previously?
Mm. That makes sense.
And the answer is yes.
Huh.
You know, the
So,
answer is yeah, you can do that. Yeah.
I think we are now in a very interesting time, right? With AI, everyone can write more or less scripts and get to a result. And I cannot predict the future, but probably we will see more and more people having tiny automation scripts for tasks. So kind of microservice for network automation or function as a service.
Yeah.
I could imagine that we come to this point because it's quite easy to have a simple script or a CLI tool for an MCP or whatever. So would it make sense to have nice templates in Backstage? And then if I need to have a new tool, a new function, I just kind of use AI, get the template, create my new project for one single task. And then, of course, I need something to plug this into my orchestration layer.
Oh.
Yeah, good question. And so that is a thing that I think we're seeing across the sort of like the industry with like skills files and agent files and things. And so I started working on this as well myself, is actually building those sort of like, templates within the skills files as well. So that again, developers aren't undertaking that sort of like day one journey or day zero sort of like starting place, and then they're sort of like hitting the same blockers that developers have happened even on their team or different companies across the way, that there is actually standards here of how something is built. And we're doing that. I'm doing that now with Portal, building the skills files and things, so that when we're building sort of like plugins and things, there's not so much guesswork that you're actually doing. You're able to sort of like pull it in the skills file. The skills file kind of acts as your sort of like template, and then you're able just to build on top of that. But you're building on that within a system which has guardrails. So it's meeting all of your sort of like foot. In this instance, it's meeting the standards that we've predefined and preset within there, so that we know when this is going to be built, and we have a lot more faith that when this is going to go into production, it is actually meeting our standards and we're building the same way. Because this is a sort of like again, goes back to that sort of like a universal challenge of when we're building something, the same way that I mentioned, that when we're on building on engineers here, we follow golden paths, but the skills file is now taking that golden path one step further. It's no longer about the golden path, which is a very sort of manual process. The skills file sort of like accelerates that journey.
So it's kind of the evolution of CI/CD pipelines in the end, or how would
Yeah.
I need to look at
Yeah,
this?
I mean, it does go into the CI/CD pipeline. It does flow and go completely, into the pipeline. It does take a place sort of like within that system. When you're building something, is you're still going to push it through your pipeline, because you're still in this use case I'm speaking about, you're still pushing code into your GitHub, and it still then goes into that pipeline, and your CI checks are going to still be running. But what is worse is kind of and I've been bitten by this a number of times, is you write some code, you think, great, this looks good, it works, I'm happy with it. You add it, you commit it, you push it, it goes through the pipeline, and then you get pipeline failed errors. And then you have to go through those errors, and you have to go back and fix all of those things, of those errors, because it might be something like versions of something that you're using. It might be standards, whatever your pipeline is actually checking here when it's going through that pipeline. And what you're seeing is your sort of like your failed message, because it has to meet your organization's standards within that pipeline, or that CI check is running, it's going to the pipeline. But if you've got that kind of skills file and you have that already, you're already checking all of those boxes. So absolutely, then whatever you're writing here, you've got a greater assurance for me that when it goes into that pipeline, that the skills file is already sort of like trained on that pipeline. So you're building something which has a lot more sort of like assurance when you're pushing it through that pipeline. Now, with all of that said, I was talking about that shift in the documentation piece that I did earlier. And I built the skills file to do this, and I pushed it through, and I mentioned I had 200 and something links, and then I worked them down, and I worked them down, and I worked them down. I can manually check these my side before, because the whole reason I knew the links were broken is because they were failing in the pipeline. The pipeline was telling me broken links, broken links, broken links. It's just a flood of messages on the pipeline. I submitted all these. Like I said, I got this down to 0. And I got this down to 0 in about an hour. My tests came back and they said, I ran I've got a broken link checker, which I have got in my pipeline. I can run this locally. came back and said, yeah, passing, absolutely passing. So I know that the work that I've done with Claude and everything that I've done is fine. Added it, committed it, pushed it. This went through the pipeline. It passed all the pipeline checks and then went into the human review because we still have human reviews.
Mm-hmm.
So I passed this off into the various teams. Now, interestingly, the link check, Claude is finding no issues. The link check is finding no issues. But yet when a human checked this, they actually found three broken links. They still found links which needed to be amended.
Mm-hmm.
So the human eye still checked in there and still looked at that. But to me, that's still a great success because I went from 200 and something right down to the only thing being really looked at here, and this was by a senior member of our team, going, yeah, actually these links should be this instead. So we just went in, and that was just a very, very small manual fix, and we're still done. And we're still done within, a number of hours.
Mm-hmm.
This is really interesting, and of course speaks to like usage with Claude or whatever. Like, are you breaking? It's
Yeah.
Keeping up with all of Anthropics and Codex, like little tweaks and twirls, and every day you need to set a new thing. You have to an environment variable has to be set to X, otherwise you're running it like a muggle, basically, to put in a Harry Potter
Yeah.
reference.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things where we talk about cognitive overload for engineers and developers.
Mm-hmm.
And this whole you must learn this now piece.
Mm-hmm.
And I've often referred to it as just like the look squirrel moment and things, is the industry that we're in changes rapidly, really, really rapidly. And it's changing faster than ever before. Staying on top of this and trying to stay on top of this, all it's going to give you is imposter syndrome. And it's going to make you feel like poop at the end of the day because there is no human that can keep up with this.
Mm-hmm.
Not all of us are sort of like Boris, I'm going to pronounce his last name, or Boris Chetney. Not all of us are like that. Or Peter, who invented OpenClaw. The one or two, the these genius people who are out there right now, and they are super genius people out there
Mm-hmm.
that, who are sort of right on the sort of like the front of this, but they've been working on this months before it's even been released to the public. They've been working on this in secret for the company on their own time, months before and stuff. And I think when something drops like that, it's kind of, you shouldn't just drop what you're doing and then just sort of like jump to this, jump to this, jump to this, jump to this.
Mm-hmm.
Finish what you're doing, look at that thing that's come out and think, is this going to be useful to me right now? If it's useful for you right now, put that in your book and say, okay, I'm going to learn this next. I'm going to understand how this technology works next. Don't stop what you're doing and then just move on to the latest shiny thing. Because at the end of the day, you'll have gained nothing. You'll be sort of like, 1% knowledge in this, 1% knowledge in this one, and you won't really truly understand how something works.
True. Yeah, no,
So
there's no way to end this. Yeah, go ahead, Urs.
I just wanted to ask, like, what do you think? Do DevOps and operation team of infrastructure, this will rapidly change now, or will we still ask ourselves, how can we fix this in 10 years?
It's an interesting question. And I think the reason for that is, I think because things are moving fast, I think really what we need to see is wider adoptability with AI. There is a lot of people using AI for building things, for building software. And again, it's one of those places that we all look to the sort of like OpenAI. At the minute, we're all sort of like focusing on like companies like OpenAI and Anthropic and like all of those big AI companies to actually how they're doing that. But they have got a very sort of like good foundation and a good structure in place to enable them to do that. The average person, the average company can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
It's a kind of similar story again when we're talking about Portal at Spotify is, Portal is very AI agentic. It's capable of working with all of your AI flows. We've built it in that way to be able to do that. But there's still people out there who they don't have their sort of like templates. They don't have organization within their structure. And if you don't have that organization, even the best AI is not going to help you. Let's go back to our infrastructure as code days as network engineers when doing automation. Automation, and when automation came around and things, I know I didn't ever go out there in any of my talks when I was with DevNet, and I didn't go out there and say that automation is a unicorn and it's a magic wand and it's going to solve all your problems.
Mm.
To start with, for me, automation gave me more headaches than the
Mm.
CLI ever did. Completely. It caused me so much pain. And this wasn't because my coding was garbage. It was, but that was just part of the story.
Yeah.
It was because a lot of the networks that were built over the time weren't designed for automation. We hadn't built them that way at all. Our naming convention was structured differently. The way that we built things in sort of like in silos. And so automation became like the Python script just became if. There was, it was just all of this sort of variables of different sort of standards, different naming, different IP ranges, all kinds of stuff across different devices. The first thing that we had to do back in the day in network automation was standardize most of our stuff. Now, back in the day, we didn't have AI to do that. We could have just run AI and things and go, yeah, you need to change this here, this here, this here. This will give you, this sort of like symmetry across all of your devices. AI will be able to do that for you. It's going to cut that time down to enable you to do the sort of like then the infrastructure piece. But it's still the same within the industry. But if you go to sort of like, you go to the big conferences and you speak to people and you say to them, if you're in a room full of people, 100 people, for example, how many of you are using AI? Pretty much 99% will just raise their hand because so many people are using it now. It's fun. It's great. It's such a wonderful thing just to be able to play with. Like you were talking about the sort of like the assistant piece. Then ask people how many are using this in your companies. That 99% will go down as quickly to as low as 2% quite easily, because we still have big trust issues about letting this loose within our production environments. Again, I'm going to go back to the network automation piece, where the biggest question I got asked on DevNet was back in the day was, how do we convince our leadership to let us do automation? Because they didn't trust it at all. They just didn't trust automation. And that was the hardest part. It wasn't writing the Python. It wasn't writing Ansible, because people can pick these skills up really, really quickly and they can start to automate their workflows. It was convincing their leaders, their managers, their organization that, to quote the Mandalorian, this is the way. This is the way that we go forward. And some companies were doing that, but like the large enterprise companies just wouldn't. They weren't interested. That was the hardest sell. And it's the same thing now with AI. People are building a lot more with it. Are people putting this into production now? There's not as many people, I don't think, are putting it into production as we actually think they are. So again, it's this kind of looking from the outside in, where companies are looking and thinking, wow, everybody's deploying absolutely everything with AI right now. We have to do the same as well. But in realistic terms, no, they're not. They're really, really not.
But they're pretending to, or like they.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing as well. Like, and you alluded to it a little bit right at the start of this when they say, we're making redundancies because AI is doing this. Well, AI's just become today's scapegoat.
Yeah, there's a recession going on, and we're going to pretend it's not happening. Okay, otherwise the sponsors will leave. But then again,
there's all kinds of reasons.
What's your take on automation had to had to walk had to crawl so that AI would one day be able to run. We're not there yet with AI, but leadership, at least that I talk to, is a lot more excited about well-made structured automation workflows and giving AI hooks into that and following the approval process. Like companies that invested heavily into the AI train, did the work, got the human checked off, solid deployment pipelines, solid mitigation workflows. They are just probably having a field day right now. At least the parts of what I work with, like the
Yeah.
things that we invested in, like we could just strap an AI on it, and we already have the finite state machine. The failure states have been mapped out. There's really no way for him to shoot his foot off. And on those ones, it's amazing. Like it's a golden age.
Absolutely is. Absolutely is. But that's we've seen this sort of like historically
Mhm.
across our industry for sort of like decades. It's sort of like as the industry changes, then people are almost there, but then there's corner cases. It's
Uh-huh.
kind of like, okay, how do we need to resolve this corner case first? We need to have these things in place first, before we can do that. And again, if we look back again, on network automation, it's kind of like, yeah, we can do all this great stuff with netconf, and then you find this bunch of switches which don't support netconf.
Uh-huh.
And then it's like, right, what do we do here? We either adapt the code and just use SSH to do this, or do we change the switches?
Womp
Which do
womp.
we do?
We're
So
not
if we
changing the
want,
goddamn switches. That costs money. Get out of here. CapEx year.
yeah, exactly. So I've done this. You kind of find that workaround within that, and you'll find those cases, within that, and that's ultimately what stops you putting the sort of like turbocharger on your company vehicle, because you have these foundational things
Uh-huh.
which don't work. And years ago, when I used to talk about this, years and years ago, back in the day, I used to have this um, performance car, hot hatch.
Mm.
I used to have a Ford RS Turbo. It was built 1989, so I'm showing my age, and I ran this in the 80s. And this was the RS Turbo Mark 9. Sorry, Mark 2. The Ford Escort I think it was a Mark 4, but Mark 2 RS Turbo. Now, Ford did a great job with these cars. The RS Turbo is a classic car. I mean, you can't buy one now for under 30,000 in the UK if it's in mint condition. They're wonderful. I still see them, and I still get that sort of, I want one of those to put in my garage and drive on a summer's day feeling.
Mm.
So Ford bought these cars out, but what they did was they took the standard car, the standard Ford Escort from the 80s. They put on a nice body kit with a spoiler and a splitter and side skirts, and they put vents in the bonnet, and they put in racing seats, and a nice custom interior and all of the rest of it.
Mm.
And then they got the standard engine, which was back in the day probably a 1.3 litre CVH block engine.
What's that? The
And they
V.
upgraded that to a 1.6 litre engine, and then they bolted a turbo on top of that. So they took
Is
the
that a
standard
V4 or
car of
V6 or
80 brake
V8?
horsepower
Hmm.
to nearly 200 horsepower. The one thing they didn't do
Mm.
was change the brakes. Now, this is the kind of the point that I'm alluding to is kind of like you make all of these upgrades, but you forget about the fundamental thing.
Mm-hmm.
The fundamental thing of this, in the car's case, the stopping power, which is, equally as important as the acceleration. But what I think happened was, I think they spent so much money on the acceleration, they forgot or ran out of money to do the braking
Mm.
side of it. And I think that when you're moving forward as a team, as an organization, as a company, those things must run in parallel. And I think that is the paradox that we live in now, where people want to race forward, but the foundational kind of stopping point isn't there.
Or one AI security incident and management decides to lock everything down. There's extremes to
Yeah.
everything, right? It can go
Yeah,
either
and
way.
it seems that way, and it seems that way that almost every day now
Mm-hmm.
we're seeing vulnerabilities, and these vulnerabilities have always been there, but they're now being they're being, like everything, they're being accelerated via AI.
Mm.
AI has now found this vulnerability. There was one recently with, I think there's one recently with Vercel. There was one recently with NMP packages. They're everywhere, and this is, and they're saying, well, AI's done this.
Which brings us to the top of the hour. So we have two things on our agenda, and we actually got a lot of good clip audio from all of that. The breaking analogy, my God, this is clip. I'm gonna the creators app. I'm gonna be making clips out of it. I should get more views on this one. So there's two things that you need to get done before we let you go back to work, which is, of course, number one, the call to action for any of our inspiring automation listeners and or professionals, so if you could give them one thing to focus on. And number two, which you need to think about while you're talking, is your unpopular opinion, a hot take, something that's going to get you crucified in the comment section. So call to action while you think about that.
Call to action. Yeah. I think the call to action for me is,
Buy good breaks.
yeah, ensure that you're building all the safeguards. Ensure that you're building all of the in the guardrails in there. It's very, very easy to look without leaping. I would say, yeah, pop over to and obviously check out what we're doing with Spotify, with Backstage and Portal. See how we've built and deployed software at scale, and see how we're dealing with this now within the sort of like AI era. There's a lot of stuff which is coming out now within, you'll have seen some on socials recently where we've, Spotify said that our engineers haven't handwritten a line of code since December. And
Sure,
so,
they
yeah.
haven't. Sure, they haven't.
Well,
Thanks, marketing.
this engineer has a little bit, so, but yeah, we've got some great stuff happening with Honk. So go and check out what's happening with Honk. There's a load of stuff out there, which is a project that we worked on alongside with Anthropic on, to again accelerate how we're building code, and how that sort of like ties into the sort of like how AI is working within Spotify. So go and definitely take a look at that. And I think that even if this doesn't directly, and I say this I've said this for a number of years, even if it doesn't directly apply to the thing that you're working on right now, it might do in the future, but use it as a vehicle for ideas. Like in 2014, I read the amazing book of SRE, How Google Builds Production-Ready Systems. For me as a network engineer, it was obviously very, very focused on software. One, I didn't build software. Two, I'm not at Google, so I didn't have the scale. But reading in that book gave me really good ideas. It gave me ideas how to structure things, how to build things, how I might look to build things in the future. And I read recently that they're actually bringing out a second version of that book, and how they're doing things with AI at Google, which is going to be really, really interesting to read. But anything that you see like this, use it as an idea, use it as a vehicle. Think how you can start to apply that into your everyday workflows, even guardrail, security, learning, deployment, pipelines. There's just going to be snippets from there. So, as a global leader in technology, yeah, check out what we're doing at Spotify. I think we're doing some amazing, amazing, amazing things. We haven't we're not the number one, audio experience in the world for no reason. He says. And then you ask me then about the controversial take.
Like, I want you to worry about your lifestyle and choices going forward. Like, the more controversial, the better. Take deep. I'm giving you time right now to think while I spew on, because that allows you to go deep into the lizard brain, your reptilian mind, and pull out that one piece of, listen, we've all been saying X, but I think it's Y. I know
Yeah.
you think it too.
I think for me, and I don't know if it's controversial, but if I was to give advice to people, I think is, don't be defined about who you are for the work that you do. I think, and the reason why I say that is, I'm over the years, and I think as a developer advocate, this is something that I've developed more. And the reason I love being a developer advocate, one is the technology is great, but two, the people are better. Technology is wonderful, but people are outstanding. They're amazing. Technology surprises me, but people go beyond that. The individuals go beyond that. Just I think it's an underestimate to say just how amazing people are, and we are as humans. One of the things that, and we certainly do this within the UK, is when you first meet somebody, you always say, hi, my name is such. And then people will always say, no matter what the surrounding is, what do you do for work?
Mm.
And I think our work really sometimes can define us who we are as people.
Mm.
And so I fell into this trap many years ago where my whole persona became I was a developer advocate, and I really didn't know me as a person where I professionally ended and I personally started.
Mm.
And so, as we talked about at the start of the thing, is setting guardrails and self-care is the whole take is it's just a job. Then take care of yourself and everything will then just fall into place.
That's yeah. I'll take it. I'll take it. That's actually just really sound life advice. If we're being really hard, and I needed my clip, I would go with something because that was really solid life advice, and I especially like the part where you say about, as a fellow CCIE, I know it's very difficult when you look at
Yeah.
the computer and then you look at yourself in the mirror and you don't really know where the company part is and the you part is. And what's even weirder is when you definitely know you're both, and the company stuff is. I think that's healthier when the company stuff is in backseat, and you liking where what you're doing in the industry and as a person. That's very important. But of course, mentioning our CCIE candidates, I mean, like for the hot take clip, I mean, it might be professional suicide to lock in for 9 to 14 months to study for a CCIE enterprise automation certification with an industry that's moving as fast and as rapidly, because it always lags behind at least a year, right? Even with micro updates and all this nonsense that they're promising.
Mm-hmm.
It might be the biggest, gun in your foot gun that you could buy right now would be to lock. Like, I would highly recommend personally the traditional CCIEs where BGP hasn't changed that much. Having a solid understanding of
Correct.
OSPF, BCP, and being able to call out nonsense on the design and it's not about knowing what to do. It's about knowing what not to do and to push the brakes, right?
Yeah. And that's and it's very same. When I see that as well as now, it's kind of like, I saw something the other day, people saying, well, you don't need to learn to code anymore because AI is out there. So,
Bollocks. Yeah.
in a nutshell, good choice of words. But are we going to say, I mean, how old's Python? 30 years?
Mm-hmm.
20, 30 years, something?
1997. Oh God, it's that old. Oh no.
Yeah, and you think about that, and we're going to say, okay, then all of these data scientists and all of this, Python is now out the window because AI's here. No, you still have to understand, and you still have to have a good, strong foundation for this.
Oh God,
Especially
I'm the same age as Python.
if you're vibe coding your own stuff, then probably no. If you're working for a company, and then yes, because when the time came for me to leave AWS, and I started to look around, I went into interviews and they said to me, we want you to write these Python scripts. And these were AI companies asking me to do this. And I was like, well, if you're an AI company, surely I'll get the AI to do this. No, doesn't work like that. You
Not
can't
yet,
go,
at least.
you can't be a vibe coder and go and work at Anthropic.
Yeah. They'll beat you with a stick in the lobby if you try and pull that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I've set some of those things for those big companies, and some of the things that they did, and they went light on me, and they were hard. I mean, really hard. And when they you all of a sudden you take the AI out of the loop from that, then you really find out how much you know.
Which that is actually clip-worthy material. I'm so happy with you, Stuart. Dear listener, we're definitely gonna have to have Stuart back. Sound off in the. I'm doing the engagement thing. I apologize, but if you want us to interrogate Stuart about some of the other topics, like, hey, Stuart, can we design together an episode? Could be. Can we design together a little backstage implementation for the average enterprise network engineer? Like no multi-tenancy, what value? We're gonna do run of the mill. Just how much life goodness you could extract out of it. That's one episode option. Another
Yeah.
episode option would be to, if we can trick Stuart to coming back, is telling us a little bit more about Honk and how's that working out? Because that I googling while he was talking, that sounds like a whole episode. I mean, we got a gold mine
Yeah.
here, listener. If you have any questions for Stuart, sound off in the comments. Or just try to hunt him down. I don't recommend hunting down our guests. But sound off in the comments. Feel free to reach out and complain. We love to hear you complain. That's the only things we actually listen to. Stuart, is there anything like people want to reach out to you online or where you hang out, or is it the best answer that we've gotten is please don't? That's been the funniest.
That Yeah, you can still find me on LinkedIn. You can still
Mhm.
find me on Twitter or X, whatever they call it these days. I'm still hanging out at all of the sort of like the fun places. I don't
Mhm.
think I'm particularly difficult to find online or to reach out to.
There we go. All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening to this special episode of Network Automagic. I actually learned a lot on this one, and I hope you stuck around and learned with us as well. For me and Urs signing off, thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next one.